Harding. Melton. Mr. President.
Here, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and remain standing for opening remarks by Councilmember Ben Gray of District 2.
One nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Today I'm going to offer a prayer, and the prayer is for a man who worked in the Public Works Division. He was a maintenance foreman, Foreman 1, Donnie Pankowitz, passed away this weekend as a result of complications from COVID-19. As you may also know, if you have listened to the news in any fashion at all, you will know that the Omaha Police Union president, Tony Connor, is having a major struggle as a result of COVID-19 as well. And so I just wanted to offer a short prayer for these two individuals who are great workers for the city of Omaha. Lord, we beseech you to keep Helen and the 4 children of Mr. Pankowitz in your grace. Take care of them, watch over them as they go through a difficult period of time in their lives. We also ask you to please look out for Linda and Tony as Tony struggles with this dreaded disease. We hope that you will keep them close to you. We hope that you will continue to work and help the family and help them get through this very difficult time. We ask these in your name, amen.
An affidavit of publication is on file for the pre-council and city council meeting, and a current copy of the Open Meeting Act is posted in a white binder on the east wall of the legislative chambers.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us at this meeting of the Omaha City Council. We're glad you could make it. As a courtesy to those in attendance and to facilitate the conduct of our business, we ask that you please silence all electronic devices. Madam Clerk, we have a proclamation to be delivered by Vice President Palermo.
Thank you, Mr. President. The proclamation today is for Al Martinez, Sr. Whereas Al Martinez grew up in South Omaha and became the Omaha Police Department's first Latino police officer in 1956. Serving nearly all of his 33 years in his home neighborhood. And whereas Al and his wife Dee were married 70 years and had 5 children and 36 grandchildren and great-grandchildren. And whereas Al, a son of Mexican immigrants, was a true patriot. He was a Korean War veteran, member of the Fraternal Order of Police, a GI Forum commander, Honor Guard member, and a founding member of the Omaha chapter of the Latino Peace Officers Association. And whereas Al Martinez believed in giving back to the community, he organized voter registration drives, coached youth sports, volunteered for Special Olympics, chaired Our Lady of Guadalupe church festivals, and volunteered for countless other organizations and charities. Al was always willing to take action and help in any way he could. And whereas in 1985, Al was the inaugural recipient of Nebraska's Hispanic Man of the Year Award. And whereas Al Martinez will be remembered as a pillar of the community, one who was generous, kind, fair, one who will be fondly remembered and dearly missed by mayors and civilians alike. And now, therefore, be it resolved that the Omaha City Council extends their sincere condolences for the family of Alfredo Al Martinez Sr. and honors him for his pioneering and generous contributions to the city of Omaha, declaring Tuesday, November 24th, 2020, Al Martinez Sr. Day. In witness, therefore, the Omaha City Council has caused the official seal of the city of Omaha to be affixed on this 24th day of November 2020. And if I could, I know there's some family members here who probably will come down and say a couple short words. We've and I have a story of my own, as we've heard many over the course of the last few weeks of Al's final days. So I met Al back in, not to date myself or Al, we met back in the late 80s. And it should be mentioned too that my wife is Al Martinez's granddaughter. So I actually knew Al before my wife. He showed up one day at South High for baseball practice. Mario Remillo, Leela's husband, was the head coach at Omaha South High, and it must have been shortly after he had left the police force. And he showed up one day and at our practice, and we're 15, 16, 17-year-old kids, so we know everything about baseball already, and we know life already. And here's this gentleman who shows up, and it took a while, like anything in life, to become accustomed to Al's doing, and once you realized who he was and what he gave, he was there for the kids, he was there for the community, he was there for the love of making people better. So much so that over that course of time, there was a respect that we had for him, a respect that in the beginning we probably didn't give him because we were young, immature, and didn't know better. And over the course of those few months, as I sit here as a council member, my senior year, I walked for Al, who ran for city council for this seat. And I remember some kids in school saying, "Well, what are you going to walk for this weekend?" And what's that sign you're making? And I said, "Well, this is for a gentleman who I've recently met, but I have the respect for him, and I believe in him, and I know the community feels the same way." I would lastly say, if you lived your life like Al, where it was always faith, family, and community, in no certain order, Omaha in general would be a better place. So, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Vinny. Appreciate that.
I don't know if any other council members
Yes, did you want to say something? If so, please tell us your name
Sure,
and address. And
Sure. Address? My name's John Martinez. Address is 610 Woodbine Drive, Papillion, Nebraska. I am the third son, the youngest that followed into my father's footsteps into law enforcement, serving the city of Omaha as a police officer. I am with my sister, Leila. She is the oldest sibling. And as I mentioned this morning to another group, she's the boss. She's also known as the boss. My wife, Michelle, and two daughters, Aubrey and Kelsey, are here today. Out of an abundance of care for my mother and my siblings, El Jr., Mark, and Mike, they're with my mom, Dolores, watching this event on television. So on behalf of our family, including our 36, my parents' 36 grandchildren, great-grandchildren, we thank the City Council so much, especially my son-in-law, Vinny, Councilman Palermo, for your recognition and my dad's service to the city of Omaha. I can tell you that he loved being a police officer. He loved serving the city. He loved helping people. He was a professional in his job, a man of great character and high morals. He loved giving back to the community in so many events, so many ways. I could story tell all night and take us into the morning hours, but I won't do that. But he was selfless in that regard. An example that Vinny just gave is perfect. So as we continue to honor his life, just want to express his love for the city of Omaha, in particular South Omaha, where he grew up and where he raised his family. One last thing that I need to do that I'd like to do, three gentlemen sitting in the back from the Latino Peace Officers Association, an organization that he helped. He was one of the several founding members. And today they did great work today, delivering Thanksgiving dinners to those in need. So born out of what my father helped start, along with several other Latino officers, is what we find today in the LPOA. So again, I thank you for your recognition of our father and our husband to our mother, Dolores. And we just appreciate it from our heart. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councilmember Festerson, you're recognized.
With the family here as well, I just wanted to take a second to add my thoughts here is also, Al was such an amazing guy and a trailblazer, South Omaha royalty is what I used to call him. A leading family in South Omaha and throughout our entire city. 36 grandkids, that's amazing. What an accomplishment that is on its own, let alone all the other things that we just recognized in our proclamation. I got to know Al well when I worked in the mayor's office many years ago, and he was working security at that time for Mayor Fahey. And he's such a quiet and soft-spoken guy and humble that you'd never know all the things he did and all the accomplishments he had. But it was truly an honor to be there with him and to work with him in that respect. So I agree, it is a big loss for our city. But no, I know his extended family, the Martinezes and the Gonzalezes and the Palermos, are going to carry on that great legacy. And what a great way to honor him, doing what the Latino Police Officers Association did today, helping families in need for Thanksgiving. So my thoughts and prayers are with you as well.
Thank you, Councilmember Festerson. Councilmember Gray, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm just going to be brief here. Al was I've been knowing Al since before I was on the council. Al used to be one of the few guys, you know, when I was in television and on occasion covering the police department, Al was one of the few guys that would talk to me regularly as a journalist. I've known the family for a long time. Al has been was a great officer when he was on the department. He was a great friend. He was a great ally, as a matter of fact, and he was always strong about making sure that more people of color made their way into the police department. And so I just want to take the opportunity to say thanks to Al for all of his groundbreaking work that many of us have taken up since that time. But what a wonderful individual and what a great person he was, and he's certainly going to be missed. And I know one time we were talking when I was getting close to the end of my time in television, and he asked me if I thought, he said, well, you should think about running for office, something like city council. And I looked at him and I said, Al, that's never going to happen, brother. We're just going to have to work out something else. But Al was a great guy, and he's going to be sorely missed. And to the family, always, you are a great family, a wonderful family, and you deserve, and he does too, all the accolades that we can give him. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Councilmember Gray. Councilmember Melton, you're recognized.
Thank you, and I just wanted to say thank you to the family, and I think it shows, I think, what Al did for the community and how he showed his belief. It's being carried on. And it looks like not just with the first generation, but in second generations, that speaks so highly of Al and then of the entire family. So I think we're lucky to have your entire family here in our community, and also in his starting of the Latino Police Officers Association. Officers, you've stayed hiding back there, even though you've been mentioned. But thank you for all the work you've done and all the work you continue to do for our city, both on and off the job. And I think that's what Al showed us, that he was caring for the community in all aspects of his life, not just on the job. So thank you. I think it appears that his legacy will live on forever. So that's wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Melton. I would just add a couple things, is to say how incredibly proud your father has to be of not only his daughter, the oldest, the boss, but of his 3 sons, to have such wonderful public servants who give so much to our community in such a dignified, exemplary way. And not only does your brother Mark and his wife sometimes wander in and sit behind me at Holy Cross at Mass, but to see your brother reach the highest levels, appointed by President Barack Obama to the United States Marshal for the District of Nebraska, that just brought immense joy to your dad, and I'm sure to you and your brother and sister as well, your whole family. And I'm sure you're not done with your work yet in honoring his legacy as you continue on in what you're doing for our city. So thank you.
Item 6, an application to consider a Class C liquor license for the Shakedown Street Tavern located at 2735 North 62nd Street.
The public hearing on item 6 begins at this time. Are there any proponents?
Yes, Ross Coley, 1114 Jones Street, apartment 10.
Hold on just a minute. Stephen Curry, 3810 Davenport Street.
Thank
Oh.
you. And you're happy to answer any questions.
Absolutely.
We'll ask you about the name in a few minutes, but are
Sure.
there any other proponents? Are there any opponents? The public hearing is closed. How'd you come up with that name? I've just,
Well,
are
we
you in
current-
over your head or?
we currently own Brooktown Palace, which we just got an SEL through about a month ago through you guys, so thank you for that. They're both named after Grateful Dead songs and Grateful Dead albums. So it was called the Barley Street Tavern for, I don't know, 20 years. We found out 40 years ago it was called the Bloody Bucket. So we feel like ours is maybe a little bit of an improvement from that.
Thank you.
So yeah, that's just where it comes from. We're big Grateful Dead fans, so yeah.
Great. Well, I saw the Dead in New Haven. That was a concert I'll never forget. Councilmember Festerson.
Too, and I think that is a big improvement on the name, so I'll go ahead and move approval.
Thank you.
Roll call.
Palermo. Festerson. Gray. Harding. Melton. Mr. President.
Yes.
Item 6 is approved, 6-0. Item 7, an application.
Thank you very much.
Good luck.
Item 7, an application to consider a Class C liquor license for Yummy Crab located at 7051 Ames Avenue.
The public hearing on item 7 begins at this time. Are there any proponents?
Hello, my name is Yu Qing Chen. I'm an owner and the manager for Yummy Crab. And it's a seafood restaurant all over the United States. We have 2 down North Carolina, and then 2 at Illinois, 1 at Michigan, and then 1 over here. We
Thanks.
try to go bigger and bigger. And then we're applying for Class C liquor license. And then the address located at 7051 Ames Avenue.
Okay. Thank you. Are there any other proponents? Are there any opponents? The public hearing is closed. Roll call.
Palermo. Festerson. Gray. Harding. Melton. Mr. President.
Yes.
Item 7 is approved, 6-0.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Item 8, an application to consider a Class I liquor license for Thai Ezron located at 555 North 155th Plaza, Suite 555.
The public hearing on item 8 begins at this time. Are there any proponents?
I'm Joshua Olson, Operations Manager for Tai Isan. My address is 8903 North 76th Street, Omaha, Nebraska.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents? Are there any opponents? The public hearing is closed. Roll call.
Palermo. Festerson. Gray. Harding. Melton. Mr. President.
Yes.
Item 8 is approved, 6-0.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Consent agenda. Any member of the City Council may cause any item placed on the consent agenda to be removed. Items removed from the consent agenda shall be taken up by the City Council immediately following the consent agenda in the order in which they were removed, unless otherwise provided by the City Council Rules of Order.
The public hearing on agenda items 9 and 10 were held on November 10, 2020. Roll call.
Palermo. Festerson. Gray. Harding. Melton. Mr. President.
Yes.
Motion passed, 6-0.
The public hearings on agenda items 11 through 45 are today. If you wish to address the City Council regarding these items, Please come to the microphone at this time, indicate the agenda item number you wish to address, identify yourself by your name, address, who you represent, and if you are a proponent or opponent. The public hearing is closed. Councilmember Festerson, you're recognized.
Thanks, Mr. President. I support all these items. I just wanted to highlight a few that I think are notable and important. Starting with number 29, this, upon approval today, will establish 13 locations throughout our city, mostly in city parking and public works facilities for electric vehicles, electric vehicle charging stations. I think a step forward for our city. I would mention number 32 and 33 that came through our planning committee that do establish and continue CARES Act distribution and CDBG funding for our basic needs throughout the community that I think are very important right now. I would also highlight number 40. This is a federal grant, almost $1 million to help with the backlog of sexual assault kits, a very important initiative, and it's very important that we clear all those kits and get them processed through the Omaha Police Department. And lastly, number 42. I see we have our former Parks Director here in the audience today, and he doesn't need to come up unless he wants to be, but we appreciate seeing him again and appreciate his work on this project, which is the Lake Cunningham renovation. And what we have here today is a basic maintenance agreement that continues the city's involvement in that overall facility as the private sector continues to step up and make some major improvements there. I think over $18 million now has been improved at that location, including a trail now all the way around the lake that'll eventually connect into our entire trail system. And we hope to have that first phase open in the spring. So making great progress there too. I see there's other lights, but I'll go ahead and move items on consent, which are 11 through 45.
Thank you, Councilmember Festerson. Councilmember Harding, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. I had a question first on number 11, and I don't know if anyone from the Finance Department might be here to answer that, but I think we had a note that they were behind on their restaurant tax collections. Is there?
I don't
think
see
there's
anyone from
Finance. So I don't know what that, there's no issue on the manager application, is there? Okay, so maybe what I might want to do then is I'll take my second back, Mr. Festerson, and I'd like to pull 11 so that we can vote on it separately then.
That's fine.
So,
Really, Mr. President, what I'll do is remove my, I'll take back my motion and approve items 12 through 45.
all right, and I'll second that.
Noting that 11's been removed from consent at the request of Councilmember Harding. Roll call.
Well, I had a couple other things.
Oh.
Sorry.
Sorry.
Thank you, Councilmember Festerson, for bringing up 32 and 33, which was the amendments to the consolidated plan and the CARES Act money for certainly those that are in need, and the planning department's coordination of the disbursement of some of those funds. And then also then on 43, I think it's important to note that this is the CARES Act reimbursement money in coordination with the state and the county. And I want to thank the finance department and the administration for doggedly working so hard, and here's Mr. Curtis right on cue, doggedly working so hard to ensure that the city of Omaha was able to receive CARES Act money that was so needed because of the COVID pandemic. And then I guess we'll address 11 then separately, but I wanted to make sure that we thank both the finance department and that staff, the administration, for coordinating those efforts with the state and the county to receive those funds.
Thank you, Councilmember Harding. And I would say over the lunch hour, I did see the check. So it's not only not in the mail, it's here. And I think Mr. Curtis was going to personally run it over to the bank himself. So,
We were joking on our finance committee that it was going to be one of those, the
Yeah.
big cardboard check.
yeah,
No?
I may have a picture of that check, just in case you're wondering.
Okay.
Thank you, Councilmember Harding. We have a motion, a second on 12 through 45.
Palermo. Yes. Festerson. Yes. Gray.
Yes.
Harding.
Yes.
Melton.
Yes.
Mr. President.
Yes.
Motion passed 6-0.
Is there a motion on 11?
Yeah, I'll make a motion to lay over item 11 until, let's see, I guess would be the 10th. Oh, no, I'm sorry, I'm on the wrong month.
8th.
The 8th of December.
Second? Roll call?
Palermo.
Yes.
Gray.
Yes.
Harding. Melton. Mr. President.
Yes.
Motion passed 6-0. Item 46, an ordinance to approve a memorandum of understanding with Local 251 for increased shift differential pay for street maintenance employees during the 2020-2021 winter season.
The public hearing was held November 10. Roll call. Oh, sorry, Vice President Palermo.
Thank you, Mr. President. Would there be somebody here to let me know how many openings there currently are within Public Works street maintenance that the winter shifts?
I think the city engineer's here.
Okay.
Will you, do you have the information, Mr. Fitzer?
Todd Pitzer, Public Works. I'm looking at an email that was sent from our HR department earlier today. So we've got, let me just go through the table, Councilman. Would that...
Or just give me the number of how many openings we have that would fill these spots.
Okay, so AEO 1, we have 13 vacancies. AEO 2, which is automotive equipment operator, we have 6 vacancies. AEO 3, we have 2 vacancies. Maintenance repair 2, or an MR2, we have 7 vacancies. And a city maintenance foreman 1, we have 1 vacancy.
Thank you. So, Mr. President, what I'd also like to mention is this is the same MOU that we approved last year, and it was due to the fact that we couldn't keep street maintenance workers in the Public Works Department. It was a way of saying, hey, thank you for working these long shifts, change of hours away from your family, in extreme conditions. And I know it went over well, but obviously it didn't go over well enough because we still have this many openings. And let's see, 19, 20, 20, 28 current openings. Now these would be people who would be part of this workforce to maybe run a hot patch truck, fill your potholes in the winter. It could also be the people driving the orange truck with the plow on it, making sure you can actually, well, maybe not get to work during COVID times, but at least get out of your neighborhood to go to the store. So this is important to have when you have a shortage of employees, and I think it's beneficial. Actually, it probably should be more than $3 or $4 an hour. So there's already been a motion. That's it on this. I just wanted to make sure we knew how many people we were still short within this bargaining unit for these critical jobs for the city of Omaha. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Palermo. Councilmember Melton, you're recognized.
So with that, are there job openings? I mean, if anybody's watching, is there a place where they can go to apply for these jobs, Mr. Fitzer? I mean, are you looking in addition? I mean, I know we need to make sure that we're paying them the extra, and I've gone and visited with them. I've rode on the snow plows. I am 100% behind giving them a pay differential, and would agree. I mean, if we could afford it, it should almost even be more, because they basically give their lives up during the winter. I mean, in the jobs they do. So I fully support this. Are there openings that you're looking to fill right now, or are we still kind of in that budget freeze for hiring?
Todd Pitzer, Public Works. No, we're not in a budget freeze for these positions. We have been constantly working with our HR department, and these vacancies are continually being filled. As you've heard from me before, these are entry-level positions,
Right.
Specifically the AEOs. So we have folks that come in and they get other job opportunities. As you know, there's a shortage of CDL drivers, so we lose some of those folks to other opportunities in that field, and as well as people that want to move up in the city of Omaha and take other positions.
And these
So
jobs come with the health benefits.
That's
I mean,
correct.
they're full-time jobs. So I guess
They are.
I know that there's a lot of people that watch us out in TV land. There's a number of people here. We even have media people here that may not be here for this issue. But these are really good jobs, and we have job openings. And if we could get it out there and maybe get more people to apply, I think that would be great. So maybe even just having a mention to anybody that you know who would be looking to get in on a full-time job where your movement up, there's a lot of room for movement where you can go higher. And then in the next one, we're going to be dealing with Foreman, which you could work up to as well. So these are great jobs that we have open and available right now in the city of Omaha. So please keep that in mind for any of your family or friends. Let them know that they can apply at the city of Omaha for some of these jobs, which are well needed, and they're also doing a service to the community as well in these jobs, a great service to our community. So thank you. That's
Thank
all I
you,
wanted.
Councilmember Melton. I would just add too, it was a year ago, we challenged the HR department in its hiring practices to, be less selective in terms of the stringent eligibility requirements, and to consider employing those whose records perhaps had not been clean. And it was I think through the unanimity of what came from this council, we learned as of the last Human Resources Committee meeting that the HR department is in fact working with a nonprofit in Omaha that is a reentry program for people coming out of the prison systems and jails of our state and county, and now being willing to consider hiring people that have not so clean pasts. And that's a good thing. We can do more, but that's a heck of a start. The other thing I would say is perhaps you just heard what Mr. Fitzer said and thought, well, I don't have a CDL driver's license. Well, guess what, folks? The city now, because again, improving its programming, will put you through Metropolitan Community College so that you can, while you're earning your income working for the city, you get your CDL. We'll provide you with that training. And then you get a career path ahead of you working for the city. And so I want to applaud HR for being willing to open up the hiring process and for providing the education needed for people who saw barriers to applying to the city, now hopefully see opportunities here. Was there a motion, a second? Roll call.
Palermo. Yes. Festerson. Yes. Gray.
Yes.
Harding.
Yes.
Melton.
Yes.
Mr. President.
Yes.
Motion passed 6-0. Item 47, an ordinance to approve a memorandum of understanding with the Civilian Management Professional Technical Employees Council for increased shift differential pay for the city maintenance foreman during the 2020-2021 winter season.
Vice President Palermo, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. And we've already heard the numbers of what we were short previously on item number 46. And I believe that I heard on item number 47, we're short one employee. So what I've been talking about over the course of the last couple weeks is how this works with bargaining units. It isn't this employee makes more than I do, so therefore I want to make this much as well. What I was given as a reference was an AEO 3 to assume why this was necessary for number 47. I was given reference to a paycheck stub of a AEO 3 with numerous years of service and a Foreman 1 that probably didn't have that many years of service. The starting rate was more for the AEO 3. So I'm not sure why I was given that, like I wouldn't be able to understand the difference. And what we're asking for is we're asking for the Foreman 1s within the street maintenance department to get more money. Now, I'm not against Simtech bargaining for their employees for more money if they feel it's necessary. But this isn't where it happens. It doesn't happen in this meeting on this floor. So whoever brought this up through these channels to think that I wasn't going to notice it and it would be okay, it's not okay. If you want more money, bring it up with your bargaining unit and get more money. I'm not saying it's not deserved. It probably is. But if we scroll back through what we just approved with $50,000 for different groups to manage what we have for snow removal accounts out there, you've just lessened the workload for these Foreman 1. So we spent more money to lessen the workload, but because some in a bargaining unit are upset that some in another bargaining unit are making more money, that isn't how it works. You know, you can't take a Foreman 1 and work him down and complete the job. There's not a Foreman 1 that's going to go and get in a truck and go salt and sand and plow your streets. But you can take somebody from 251 and work him out of class as a Foreman 1 and pay him the differential rate. There's a big difference. And the reason this all came about is because we had a lack of employees in 251. As we see, we're still 28 employees short. Think about this, 28 employees short. If you have a 3 or a 4-man crew, do the math. You have one asphalt crew in every single district that isn't out on the streets maintaining them. That's why we give you more money. Because you're short one Foreman 1, that isn't the reason why. It doesn't work that way. I would just have everybody vote their conscience on this and really think about it. If you want the city to be a better place and you're worried about your roads and your snow removal, give it to the workers who are actually doing it, not the person handing out the sheet, here's your next route that you're going to go take care of. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Palermo. What's the pleasure of the council on item 47? Roll call.
Palermo. Festerson. Gray. Harding. Melton. Mr. President.
No.
Motion passed 4-2. Item 48, an ordinance to approve the collective bargaining agreement with the Omaha Police Officers Association for a term of December 27th, 2020 to December 20th, 2025. A is communications in support, B is communications in opposition.
The public hearing was held on November 10. Councilmember Gray, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm going to be just a few minutes here, and I hope not to take very long, but I think it's important to lay out some things here that don't get laid out as often as they should be. And I want to start with, first of all, you know, people have concerns about the issue of arbitration being in the contract. The fact of the matter is it was explained to you a couple of weeks ago by our city attorney, by a couple of our city attorneys, and one of the attorneys for one of the police bargaining unit, as to how difficult and time-consuming and expensive it would be to address it from this perspective. You have to keep in mind that we have been, this has been in the contract for a significant period of time, and just very briefly, when you talk about the number of comparable cities and who, if this were to go to the Court of Industrial Relations, and we were to look at the comparable cities, all of those cities have arbitration. And so it would be difficult, and Paul, you correct me if I'm wrong at some point, but it would be a very difficult, time-consuming, and cost significant dollars to taxpayers if we were to take this on. There may be some other ways to do that, but you know, with the arbitration, that is an issue that's a very difficult nut for us to crack at this point in time. But there were some things that were done, there were some other items that were done within this contract that while they don't address what people would like to see in terms of more transparency as it relates to arbitration, there were other couple of things that exist within the contract that hopefully will make it a little bit better and a little bit easier and a little bit more easy for the police chief and the police chief's command staff to address problem police officers. And one of the most notable things that was achieved in this contract was the 2-year probationary period for police officers that are coming on the force. Because this gives the chief, the way it works, when a police officer comes on the force, they have 14 weeks of training and then another 4 to 6 months, I believe it is, working with a seasoned police officer. And then for the evaluation purposes, a chief only has about 2 or 3 months to evaluate an officer. With this particular instance, they will have an additional year to evaluate police officers and potentially get some of the bad officers off of the force. And so with that and a couple of other small changes that were made to the contract, it won't address arbitration, but it comes really close to doing that. I want to talk about pre-COVID-19 and since COVID-19. Prior to COVID-19, we had a police department that was one of the best in the country. There's no question about that. And for people to try and lump this police department in with other police departments around the country is just simply unfair. This police department is involved with its command staff every week. We started working on this, and when I say we, the Empowerment Network and a number of other folks, we recognized the problem with police community relations, and rather than talk about it, we did something about it. We created a 360 violence prevention program, and that is a meeting where police officers, command staff, and the community come together once a week. Once a week. This is unheard of in most other cities. Get together once a week to talk about the issues of the police department, and when there are issues that come up, those issues are addressed in these 360 meetings, and sometimes those meetings are intense when there are some issues on the table, but at least there is a place where people can go and talk about these issues and talk about them in such a way that we can achieve resolution, we can talk openly with each other. This 360 violence prevention move was one of the things that when I go around the country and talk to people, you know, they ask us, how is this police department able to, number one, reduce the violence rates the way that they did prior to COVID-19? How did this police department attain the level of police community relations that they attained? And when I say the level that they attained, I mean in terms of the Step Up Summer Jobs program, where police officers take young people and they work with them through the Empowerment Network. But not only that, they have taken on a number of young people as interns in various aspects of the police department, which is almost, again, not heard of very often anywhere around the country. The PACE program is second to none in this country in terms of the work that police officers voluntarily do to work with young people on a weekly, daily basis, training them and teaching them sports and other kinds of skills. This police department in 2019, as I mentioned before, this police department was 6 hours away from not having used their weapons at all that year, which is another item that is unheard of in most police departments around the country. When I travel, and I do travel quite a bit to the national legal cities and other events, when we go to those places, one of the things that's always talked about in the various breakout sessions that we have are the Empowerment Network and the Omaha Police Department. Most people around the country can't believe or have a hard time believing that this police department has the level of police community relations that it does, that the Empowerment Network was able to do many of the things that it's been able to do, especially in conjunction with the Omaha Police Department. And so from that perspective, I think it is important. And when we're talking about this particular contract and we're talking about officers, the vast majority of the officers on the police department are good and decent officers that do a good job, that want to go home every day to their families, and they want to make sure that the community goes home to their families as well. Sometimes there are circumstances that come up that are out of everybody's control, and they need to be investigated, they need to be talked about, but they need to be treated fairly, just like anything else. And so I said all that to say this police department is one that I have worked with very closely, that the community that I represent has worked with very closely, and and I'll make the motion if necessary, but my motion today is to approve the contract for the Omaha Police Department. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Councilmember Gray. No further Councilmember Harding.
It's hard following Councilmember Gray sometimes, well, probably all the time, but I want to thank him for those comments because I think they're truly spot on. I wasn't at the last meeting, which was when the public hearing was, and so I just wanted to kind of weigh in on a couple of the issues, some of which Ben just mentioned as well. So this is a collectively bargained agreement. It is fair on a compensation level and on an economic level. I've had some people contact me via calls and emails saying, weigh this over until next spring after the elections. And I want to remind people that this contract expires this year, so that's one of the reasons we want to make sure we're taking it up now. But as it relates to arbitration, certainly if police officers as well as any civil servant that works for the city they're public employees, merit-based hiring, and they're entitled to due process. So they have a right to an impartial review like any other city employee. And as has been mentioned, there's a practical reason for this as well too, is that if this were to go to the CIR, the Court of Industrial Relations, comp cities have arbitration in their agreements. And typically even if they are not in those comp cities, the CIR typically reverts back to what's in the previous contract to begin with. So that at least I think addresses the arbitration issue. Some of the other components of the agreement that I think have been pointed out that are key to remember is the probation period going to 2 years rather than 1. Easier filing process for complaints, more timely disposition of reprimands, and so that they don't get held up at the personnel board to a point in time where it becomes a moot point to hear the case. And the police department has made concentrated efforts to engage the community, as was mentioned with PACE and the Empowerment Network. So I think all in all, it's a fair package. As has been said before as well, is when many walk away from the table not happy, I think there's probably a fair agreement somewhere in there. And as I said, as this has been collectively bargained and agreed to by the two parties, I think it makes sense for us to move forward on it, and I was happy to make the second on it.
Thank you, Councilmember Harding. Councilmember Festerson, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. So as I mentioned last time we discussed this during the public hearing, I've been involved in 3 police contracts now, and the first one involved major pension reform, and I still remain very concerned about the status of our pension. We can't lose sight of that issue in these discussions. It's still only 55% funded, and that's about a $664 million challenge for our city. That's a big number. It is a long-term proposition. The rate of return has been lowered to a more realistic rate, I think, and this contract would continue a 0.75% increase to payroll contribution from both the police union and the city over the next 5 years that I think was not a given and is important because it's important we continue to make progress on that big financial challenge. The second contract really involved major healthcare reform. It moved all city employees, including police employees, to HSAs and high deductible health plans that control healthcare costs for the city and reduce our administrative output on those contracts and on that administration. And that program continues in this contract. But this contract does need to be about accountability and transparency, and that's evident from our conversations over the last few weeks. The topic of arbitration has already been addressed, I think, at the public hearing and by other council members here today, so I won't dwell upon that. But it is true to say that is not on the table for our approval or non-approval today. And if there was no agreement or delay, that would not get resolved either due to the Council of Industrial Relations and their inability to address that situation too. So the focus really turns to the new provisions and do they do enough in the area of accountability and transparency. And I did analyze a few of those last week, And I have followed up on a few of those questions I posed that weren't entirely clear in the back and forth at the public hearing. I just wanted to kind of walk through quickly. And that is citizen complaints, of course, with the Citizens Complaint Review Board. As I noted during the public hearing, I have been skeptical of that mechanism in recent years. There have been improvements announced to that process and to that board that I hope do make it more effective and more efficient. I asked at the time if this contract would codify in any way that board going forward, and that answer was clearly no during the public hearing. And the reason I asked that is because should that mechanism change, or should there need to be a change, this contract would not preclude that. It's only done by executive order, so I wanted to make that clear. And there is improvement in terms of the access to the forms and complaint process outlined in this contract. The commitment to have forms online and more prevalent, and 3 places to turn them in now that aren't just the police department. And yes, they must be notarized, but I also did confirm they can be notarized anywhere, just like any legal document can be. I agree with Councilman Gray and the chief's testimony that I think the biggest change is the expansion of that probationary time frame. It adds a full year beyond training by which an officer can be fired. And if they're fired, there is no arbitration. That's it. I think there is a big difference between being trained and then being actually on the street by yourself. And I believe the chief when he says this is a big tool for him, and you can frequently tell early on if problems are going to arise or if there are disciplinary issues that need to get addressed, and this would allow him to address those quickly. There was a lot of discussion last time, too, about the reprimand committee and questions about that and its composition, which I understand. The one question I did follow up on that was not clear during the public hearing was the city's appointment on that committee and who appoints it and how does that work. It is not appointed by the mayor. It would be appointed by the chief, the police chief himself. And the reasoning for that in my discussions with the mayor is that the chief would remove the politics from any kind of selection, and presumably that person would back the chief's reprimand or action that was taken and be that voice for him on that committee, which I think was a reasonable answer. So it may not be ideal, but those decisions are binding, and that's different than now. A situation that does have to get addressed, that does happen right now, is that appeals go to the personnel board, and sometimes they're never even heard over the span of a year's time frame, and that's totally unacceptable. This would make that better, I think. The last question I answered, or I asked during the public hearing that was maybe the only one I didn't get on the record is the financial question. I see Mr. Curtis here in the audience, if you wouldn't mind coming down. I think I know your answer to this question, but I do want to ask it just for the record. Do you want to identify yourself? I see him waving a $27 million check there.
30. It's 30. Steve Curtis, City Finance.
Thank you. And that question is this: should this contract be approved? We have the economic analysis that was provided to us. And in 2021, that impact is about $1.9 million, which is mostly the increase in wages. That would be up and above the police department budget this year. My question to you, realizing there's a lot of unknowns about our situation next year in our budget, is are you confident that would not impact any other city service or any other service you might seek to provide through the city budget as planned for next year?
Again, Steve Curtis, City Finance. I think there was a little confusion about how much was in wage adjustment and its ability to actually cover that difference. So the wage adjustment amount of about 1.9 will be moved to the police budget. That may have not been made clear before, and I apologize for that.
Okay. For 2021?
Yes.
Which makes you confident there'll be no negative impact on next year's budget?
Yes.
Thank you. So then the question is, does this contract do enough? And I know I have constituents who think it doesn't. And I know I have constituents who think it goes too far. I know I also have constituents, I think a majority of constituents, who want to see us come to an agreement and want there to be progress and improvements. And in my judgment, this does make some improvements in a number of areas, and in areas that would not make progress without such an agreement or without any agreement. But I also want to say, if this is approved today, this doesn't end the conversation. This is a contract. improving public safety, police community relations, and accountability and transparency is a never-ending task, and it's one we all have to be committed to. We need to continue to find ways to improve this process and continue to find ways to work together as a community. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Festerson. I want to thank Councilmember Gray for his eloquent remarks, and the City Attorney, Deputy City Attorney Bernard Indenbosch, for shedding some light during the public hearing on what several of us thought we would be capable of accomplishing in terms of change, and that was the thing that at least I was hearing most about from my constituents on the arbitration process. Turns out that's the thing we could do least about because of a combination of the due process requirements that the U.S. Constitution, as our U.S. Supreme Court has told us, is afforded to police officers in terms of their bargaining rights, and the contract is property. And then the fact that our sister cities have that, and so if we say no, as some of my constituents who have emailed me have asked me to do, what does that look like? So that's one thing I don't know that we really shed light on during the public hearing, but what that looks like is the city hires attorneys and then has to litigate at the Commission on Industrial Relations. We have to hire experts to do the hourly rate value compensation studies and comparables in terms of the terms and the conditions of employment. That is not uncommon between experts and attorneys to have several $100,000 expended in terms of what our lawyers are telling us, in this case, will be a losing proposition. The rates that our comparable city police officers are being paid, we are told, is actually the contract we have before us less than what they would likely be awarded at the commission. So let's talk about what that looks like. If the police payroll and as a part of the departmental budget is $100 million, and it's more than that, 1%, if we're wrong and go to the commission, that's $1 million more that will be awarded to the police in wages. So we have the downside cost to this is hundreds of thousands in legal fees and expert witness fees, at least $1 million if we're 1% wrong on wages, and that adds up quickly to get terms and conditions that we're already told that we have in there. So what this looks like if we vote no and reject this contract is you're not going to change the things that we want to change the most. It's going to cost us more money to find that out. And so those of you who contacted me about, well, it's too generous of pay for our police officers, they're going to get paid more. How frustrating would that be? And to me, there's a way to achieve these issues of transparency, but unfortunately, as the way we're set up now, under the state law, that change happens in the unicameral with 25 votes and a governor's signature. If you want to mandate transparency in the arbitration process or change the arbitration process in a way that still respects the due process rights afforded to police, that takes state law. That's not something that we're empowered to do here, because if we say no to this contract, we're still going to have the same arbitration process. It's going to cost us more to do that, and I don't think that that's wise. And as Councilmember Festerson said, that doesn't mean that this conversation ends. This conversation has been ongoing. Several of us on this council were on the council when we opened up an evening public forum for citizens to come in and share their stories about encounters that they had felt were unprofessional or in some cases excessive in nature in terms of what happened to them in their encounter as a traffic stop. And believe it or not, the professional police chief that we have, and when he was on the command team for the predecessor chief, they took all that information. They went over all of that information. And in the last contract, we had evolution in terms of improvement. In this contract, we have evolution in terms of improvement. And that's, in my experience in the 11 and a half years that I've been here, the way things happen in institutions is you have progress achieved over time, and it is because of the advocacy of people weighing in on these issues. It is because of people going to Lincoln. And I know there are several state senators who are interested in this topic, so maybe it will be a topic in Lincoln this spring. Maybe not because of the inability to really hold a lot of hearings because of COVID, but this discussion will continue, and these contracts will improve, but there is a modicum of improvement in this contract that will make a big difference on discipline. And no, it's not in the arbitration side or side of this contract, but that in my painful education, I learned, and because I respect the opinion of Bernard Indenbosch, your deputy city attorney, I respect the opinion of his boss, and I respect the opinion of our labor negotiator, Mark McQueen, and our police chief. I believe that they're telling me the truth, that we would lose this issue. We would not change this provision in our contract this time. So with that, I will be voting for and in support of this contract. I don't see any further lights, so last call, council members, for anyone.
President Jerem, doesn't happen all that often on many issues, but you're exactly right in everything that you just said. I know you and I can disagree, but you just presented, if we vote no, what's the result? And that's it. The result that many people I know from your district and your constituents that have emailed me have said that the things that they want, we can't get out of this contract. And in fact, if we go to the CIR, we will get something that actually those who are against the contract would like even less than what this contract is. And again, in the collective bargaining process, this isn't something where you can bargain in public. It's very similar even to when we have the lawsuits that are pending. We don't have settlement conferences open to the public. I mean, there are some things, and collective bargaining within unions and legal cases and settlements and how you do things are very similar in that nature. So how we listen to constituents and how they have a part in that is like what you said. You talk to your council members along the way. We want to hear about your experiences, your thoughts, but when it comes to determining what wages should be, that's not something that we can sit and have a debate with the public on whether they think it should be more or less. As Councilman Festerson said, the pension is still underfunded, and it is a concern. But increasing the wages, increasing the number of police officers, and most importantly, what this contract does is it continues to have the additional 0.75% contribution by both the police officers and the city, which expires at the end of this year. So between all three of those things, we will continue to hopefully see that reduction as we see it on the curve going down. So we are making progress on that pension, and I know that started prior to myself coming on council, when I believe you and the mayor and Mr. Festerson, I think, were the three that negotiated that contract as council members. And you started that pension reform that we are continuing. So to say, well, if I don't get everything I want, then I'm going to vote no and let it go to the Court of Industrial Relations, and even if we get something worse, who cares, because somehow we've delayed it, it actually just doesn't make any sense. Because this isn't something where we can say we're going to put it on hold and not go to the Court of Industrial Relations. Those are our options. And this was carefully negotiated, and I think it's very fair, and it's fair for the taxpayers, and it's fair for the police. And again, that doesn't stop the conversations, but when it comes to the transparency and the arbitration, you aren't getting that at the CIR. In fact, we wouldn't get the things that the police have agreed to now in this contract. And I think that that's what's really important to know. So I agree with what you said, and I plan to vote for this contract, and I appreciate all the hard work, and especially all the hard work of Tony Connor, who Councilman Gray mentioned, who this was one of the things he has spent many, many months working on and negotiating and speaking with us and informing us and keeping us updated along the way. We didn't just get this contract a couple weeks ago. We've talked to both sides all along the way for many, many months. And I do hope that it is a unanimous vote on this council, showing that we have listened to both sides and all sides of the issue, and recognize that work he put in. And again, I think it would be great when he hopefully wakes up soon, that he heard we had a unanimous vote for this contract. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Melton. Vice President Palermo, you're recognized. You should be in the queue.
Thank you, Mr. President. There it is. Sorry about that. 18,000 law enforcement agencies across the country. Why is Omaha's the best? Why do we think Omaha's the best? Well, we don't know that. But that's not our job up here. Our job is to approve or not approve the contract that we have, the collective bargaining unit, our agreement between the City of Omaha and the Omaha Police Officers Association. That's what we're here to do. But sometimes when you sit in this seat, people want you to be a little more direct, and they want to hear the truth. And the truth is, if you sit here and you don't back public safety, then shame on you, because this is what we have to have in the City of Omaha. You have to support the fire department. You have to support the police department. These are humans who make mistakes, but at the end of the day, you have to have a contract to make this work. Now, we can sit back and say we have the best police chief and the best command staff, and I know I have the best captain in my Southeast precinct who goes above and beyond. I'm just going to be honest. And on down the line, for all the way down to Uniform Patrol Bureau officers. I have not met one that does not care about the City of Omaha. Are they humans? Absolutely. But here's what needs to be said. I support the police. I support this contract. And that's the way it is, and that's the way my vote's going to be, as simple as that. Thank you.
Thank you. Roll call.
Palermo.
Yes.
Festerson.
Yes.
Gray.
Yes.
Harding.
Yes.
Melton.
Yes.
Mr. President.
Yes.
Motion passed 6-0. Next is the legislative package.
We can have one public hearing on all of these. I believe item number 50, what, Madam Clerk? 54 had a request to withdraw. So,
Motion and second.
is there a motion, a second, to allow withdrawal on 54?
Motion to allow withdrawal at 54, and I would just like to say for the public, that's that request for additional legislation regarding juveniles.
Second, roll call on withdrawal of 54.
Palermo.
Yes.
Festerson.
Yes.
Gray.
Yes.
Harding.
Yes.
Melton.
Yes.
Mr. President.
Yes.
Motion passed 6-0.
Let's cue the public hearings then on 49 through 53 and 55 through 57. Are there any proponents on these items? Mr. Chaloha, City Lobbyist.
Good afternoon, Jack Chaloha, City Lobbyist. Thank you for these matters before you this afternoon. This is our 2021 state legislative proposals. And if I could briefly go through each item, I would like to thank everybody who offered input and helped generate this legislative program. So item 49 is by Council Members Jerem, Festerson, and Palmero. This item would amend Nebraska's Open Meeting Act to allow for virtual meetings, telephonic meetings, et cetera, in response to the COVID pandemic. Under current law, we're pretty well restricted in terms of what we can and cannot do relating to open meetings. So we're working with a coalition of public schools, counties, cities, Nebraska Board of Regents, et cetera, to come up with a draft legislation to make this more easier and easier to facilitate. So not only will our council be able to meet remotely and participate, but also the public as well. So item 50 is by Councilmember Gray. This would ask for a bill at the legislature to change the state constitution. This would allow for the use of affirmative action in Nebraska. It was prohibited in 2008 by an initiative petition. Item 51 is by Councilmember Amy Melton. This would be a reintroduction of a bill from the last couple of years creating the Infrastructure Improvement and Replacement Assistance Act. What this would do would allow cities, counties, and utilities that are all public utilities across the state to benefit from state assistance off the sales tax on their rates that are charged to customers. This way, a lot of these infrastructure facilities are 100+ years old and they need updating. So this would be a way of trying to get some assistance from the state to help us on that. Item number 52 is also by Councilmember Amy Melton. This would create a turnback program, if you will, to help with the sports facility that's envisioned out at 120th and Maple Streets, Tranquility Park. Of course, the bill would be written in such a way that it would be open to other applications as well across the state, but that's the particular project we have in mind. Item 53 is by the City Clerk's Office to help us become more efficient in terms of mailing out notice on special assessment liens that come before this body as a Board of Equalization. As you stated, 54 is now withdrawn. Item 55 is an item from Omaha Finance Department relating to the current Nebraska Convention Center and Arena Financing Assistance Act in order to make some amendments there. One of them would be to increase the amount of cap that the state offers in terms of turnback now, and also the ability to use that turnback money in ways to expand the facility or enlarge it or to build a parking structure, off-street parking. Item 55 is a request from the mayor's office, economic development team, to support a bill if introduced that would allow SIDs the authority to own, build, acquire, or purchase off-street motor vehicle parking facilities. Under current law, not only are SIDs prohibited from doing this now, the city as well could not build or maintain a parking facility within an SID under our authority. So a bill of some type is needed. All of the risk would stay with the developer on that issue. And then finally, item 57 is a resolution we put up annually in order to give me authority to represent the city of Omaha and ask various departments within our city for information, data, et cetera, to support our legislative program. And with that, I'll thank you and try to answer any questions.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents on these items of the agenda? Proponents, those in favor. Come forward, indicate the item, your name and address, the item number which you're addressing, and your testimony.
I wonder where the media went. Okay. My name is Linnell Quinn. I am a proponent for
Address, please.
Okay, 111 Ernest Jackson Street.
Is that your real address, sir?
No, I just don't feel safe giving that information.
You have to
out.
give your address or you cannot speak. It's the
Okay.
rule.
144th Street.
Sorry. Why don't you take a seat, and when I give you a chance to think about it, I'll give you another opportunity to come up. Next
I
speaker,
just
please.
wonder why the city council don't do that.
Please take a seat. Take a seat, sir.
My name's Sarah Johnson, 2316 North 52nd Street. I do want to a little bit echo, sometimes it is nerve-wracking to give your address when you're supposed to be able to stand up here and speak out about against things that are a little bit not having a popular opinion sometimes. But anyway, I want to stand up here and say thank you for number 49, especially Pete. I know it's something I've been bugging you about for years. So it's exciting to see it on here. It's a little bit tricky. I just learned more from this guy right now about these. Like, I couldn't find any information about this anywhere. I emailed Melton and Festerson. I know you had a death in the family, the city clerk, trying to find information on this stuff because I am a nerd. I do like to know what's going on, and I do like to know where the opportunities are to influence stuff because a lot of times, we'll come up here and try to say, oh, could we have information about this, or try to influence something, and we get chided for not knowing earlier we were supposed to speak up or something. A lot of these processes are pretty convoluted, so I just wanted to kind of stand up and mention that, but mostly thank you for making some changes there. Again, since I didn't see what other information is specifically on 49, I know you can't answer questions, but maybe you could email me back. That would be helpful. But I just would like to say, in the realm of accessibility, ASL is something that I think is like kind of a joke that we have to request it every week. That's just like completely eliminating an entire population of the city, which I think is disgraceful. And it's 2020, you guys, like we got to be a little bit more inclusive. And I hope that that's something that's maybe factored into 49. Again, not knowing how to find any information about it. It's problematic. I think it's a little bit strange that there's a public hearing and a vote, and it just showed up on the agenda all at the same time. And I'm sure you'll tell me that I don't need to worry about it because this is just gonna allow it to go to the state, and then it's a whole nother process. But I'm gonna just continue to show up probably every week and let you guys know when I have issues with the processes, and this is one of them. Also, yes to affirmative action. So that's all for now. Thanks.
Thank you. Next proponent, please.
Jonathan Lathan, 4331 Fort Street. All right, so I'm here to speak on item number 50, which was already approved in July by the City Council, so hopefully this is a formality. All right, so although that we can all agree on affirmative action, I think that the repeal at the legislative level is the beginning of us rebuilding a more perfect union for our state and our city. Affirmative action isn't what most people consider it to be. The opposition believes that a person's race, identification, or orientation outweigh merit when it comes to the hiring process. That if you and I have the same qualifications, I'll be chosen over you based strictly on color. No one will ever have the same qualifications, and every individual has a story and varying experiences. If your concern is my ability to gain employment over you because I'm African American male, it's your responsibility to look in the mirror and identify what improvements can be made to make you a stronger applicant. In my particular situation, I receive veteran preference points for most jobs. That may be a difference in my hiring as opposed to yours, not race. So what affirmative action does is gives underrepresented individuals an opportunity to even get in the door, doors that have not been historically open to men or women, women or people of color specifically. It gives my children the opportunity to see individuals that reflect what they look like in positions that may have an immense impact on the community and the leadership roles leading all of us into the future. If the city is honoring its pledge to increase diversity and inclusion, then the council would be remiss not to approve this resolution again. This is also an opportunity for our state and local representatives to work together and create an environment that fosters growth and prosperity for all residents. I think it was a pretty unanimous vote last time, or a pretty high vote last time when it got approved, or when it was proposed in July by Councilman Gray and by Representative Rogers. So we just hope that you continue to stick with that, post-summer incidents, requirement to keep the city safe. Thank you.
Thank you. Next proponent, please. Seeing none, are there any opponents to these items?
Luis Jimenez, 3306 Bird Street. I am a proponent for the affirmative action resolution. I understand that these items are designed to give your lobbyist an itinerary to take to the legislator. Doesn't mean that you council members can't reach out as advocates to the unicameral. It is complicated, but at least we only have one chamber in Lincoln. If we had two, it might be a little bit more convoluted. But with 50, it's still on the Nebraska Constitution. And the resolutions that you passed earlier states your position, and now your lobbyist is going to take that position to the legislator. So I hope there's movement that when that's transpiring. I do want to speak on 49, which I'm not sure what my position is. It's going to allow representatives, public office holders, to participate while they're not physically present in the meeting. And I can understand if you want Zoom to say comments, but as it comes to having a vote over Zoom, I don't know, I'm not convinced that that's necessary. You, public office holders already have a lot of power by choosing who to talk to, who to entertain. So the power invested in you guys isn't your minds, it's in your person. You can be convinced to vote one way or another through conversations, through misinformation, through experience, real or perceived. And that's a lot of power. So to that point where you would have the power to vote over Zoom, I don't agree with that. I think that you can participate over Zoom, or the community can participate over Zoom. They're not voting, to put your position on the record. So that's what I'm kind of debating over. And then the other ones look pretty good. I don't think this is like an extensive or full itinerary for the lobbyist as it relates to the issues that are important to Omaha. I think this is like a basic outline for things that the lobbyist can take to the legislator. But I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you. And just for the record, council members do go to Lincoln on their own time and do testify on bills. We also send letters that we sign on to that are delivered to the senators and committees on various issues. The mayor does, departmental heads do. Next opponent, please. Mr. Storr.
Larry Storr, 5015 Lafayette Avenue, Omaha, 68132. I am against numbers 49, 50, and 54. I'm going to piggyback on some comments I made earlier this morning.
54 was withdrawn, just so you know. 54 was withdrawn.
Okay, well, whatever. There are a few people in this room that understand freedom a little better than most of us in here, because they've come from other countries where there wasn't. Our founding fathers intended life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. This takes it away from me. It's unconstitutional, therefore you cannot enact it.
Which one are you talking about?
All three of those, actually.
Okay.
Anyway, probably more of them. The Open Meetings Act, the intent of it, is it for you or for me? It intends for us to be able to address our government. How is this going to encourage that? How easy will it be for you to flick your switch to turn it off so that nobody can hear or see out there in the city or the county? Very easy. And how easy will it be to turn it off when you're making remarks about a citizen that did take the time to call in? Remarks such as been made here before, such as uninformed citizen, untruthful citizen, and there may be an ignorant statement by a citizen, which implies the citizen is ignorant. Have you no shame? Trot down to the city and also try to amend the state constitution? You know, our federal constitution can only be amended certain ways, not by somebody here marching down there, maybe with the World Herald, and telling them what to do down there. Let the citizens amend it if they need to be amended. Undoing that particular item on affirmative action takes certain privileges and rights away from other citizens. And that is unconstitutional. We elected you guys to represent us. I think somebody on these board, this body and the morning body, needs to stand up and fight against what they passed this morning and what you're going to pass here this afternoon. Because it's an unconstitutional representation of our citizens. Back in the early days, before the Declaration, citizens ran people like you out on a stick with tar and feathers. We fought against a king and we won. We don't need that kind of government anymore. Thank you.
Thank you. And just for the record, there are two ways in Nebraska under our Constitution to achieve an amendment. One is by the right of the people to petition. The other is through the unicameral, which may pass resolutions placing single subjects on the ballot for the vote of the people. Next opponent to these items. Welcome back.
Yeah, thank you for having me. All right. Linnell Quinn, P.O. Box 11064, Omaha, Nebraska.
Well, now you got to give your address, not a PO.
1516 North 32nd?
Is that your real address?
I would assume so, Councilman.
Is it your
That's
real
why
address?
I told you. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Uh-huh. Okay, so item 50, I am a proponent, I am an opponent. I agree with the council members that would like to appeal the 2007 repeal of affirmative action. I take affirmative action personally. I'm from Michigan, Detroit, Michigan, and I can tell you right now, one of the various disasters that we faced in Detroit or in Michigan itself was the removal of affirmative action. Affirmative action was explained to me when I was growing up, but as I got older and began to study it myself, people would say, well, do you want to be hired as a person because of the color of your skin or because you're a woman or a male? And it was like, man, well, I don't want to be hired based on those merits or those things. I would like to be hired based off of my work and based off of the merits of my education, my skills, and what I developed. But the fact is how do we challenge the possibility of racial inequality in the workplace or in the public? How do we challenge that if we say, oh, okay, you, by being this person, you know, you're white or you're black, but we don't want to say that because we all know that these types of things still happen. We see this through this just on a common basis, but it's been hidden because affirmative action has been stricken from a lot of places. And if we continue to allow this to happen and we continue to train our children to believe that, oh no, it's not racist, it's not something that's a tool for Jim Crow or separation, you know, the equality. No, this is by merit. But then you have people like myself or minorities who apply for the same job, have the merits and the education, but yet turned away. But it's covered under the banding or the disbarment of affirmative action. We have to really understand that in order for us to destroy racism and racial inequalities, we have to use tools and utilization of these types of tools, which affirmative action was put in place to do that. So before I go forth, I was watching one of the radio cast of The Bosses, and I did see Councilman Gray explain his reasons of what he was doing and why he did it. So I do want to say publicly that I appreciate what you have done in that capacity. You know, for it to be explained, it makes it much better to understand why these processes happen. So for the minority of people on your council, Councilman Gray, and for the minority of Councilman Milton, and I'm going to go ahead and say Councilman, I don't know how to pronounce your last name, but I'm going to say Councilman Vinny. And for anyone else, and no disrespect to all of the Caucasian people on the council, but for those of you, and especially that you pridefully wear your mask, this is important for us. This is important for us. Moving forward, we have to take affirmative action seriously and use it as a tool to end the racism, not to use it as a tool to cover racism. That's the problem that we have. We got to stop covering up BS and start exposing it and putting tools in place to make sure that it happens that way. I yield my time.
Thank you. Are there any other opponents to these items on the agenda? The public hearing is closed. Councilmember Festerson, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll support all these resolutions, even the one that appoints Jack as our lobbyist. Jack, if you don't mind, just a couple follow-up questions for you. Go ahead and recognize yourself there.
Jack Shaloha, city lobbyist.
I think that was a reasonable request by a constituent there, in the respect that, these are kind of confusing, and these tend to be complex issues that get boiled down into a few paragraphs annually on our agenda here. And there was a summary that came out by you, which was helpful, but I guess my request maybe in the future is if we can get that out a little bit earlier and maybe attach that to the agenda so people know what these really do and what they mean might be helpful. Is that agreeable?
Absolutely. We'll be happy to do that.
Thank you. And then some questions about 49 and 50 for me. So 49, obviously, I was a co-introducer on that, and I'm supportive of that. I know there's a legislation being crafted amongst a number of groups in Lincoln right now to amend our open meetings laws and allow more virtual access, which I think is positive. And then from my perspective, not just from the pandemic, but also because that's where technology is going. And I think people are getting used to that technology, and government should adapt. I believe what they're intending to do, though, is allow Zoom access or maybe I'll just say virtual access during times of emergency or declaration of emergency by the governor. Is that correct?
That's what's driving it right now, council member, is because of the emergency relating to health, we need to move the law to be more accommodating.
And certainly that's important right now, and I think is worth doing. And that's what it would allow remote voting. And so I can understand why one might only want to have remote voting for various reasons, only during true times of emergency like a pandemic. But I would make the distinction that we can still, as a body, given the opinion of our law department, allow Zoom access to constituents who might want to have access to our meetings just to provide testimony or to participate. That's not precluded or doesn't need this state legislation to be done. So I wanted to make sure that was clear for everyone's knowledge too. The recommendation to us, should we go that route, is just to amend our city council rules, and that could be done if we achieve some consensus amongst ourselves to do that. But still, this legislation is needed to, I think, address the bigger question of declarations of emergency and pandemics and voting by public officials virtually. So supportive of that too. Right. And I would ask you too, I don't think this needs to amend anything, but if we could include the conversation of ASL in that conversation, that sure makes sense to me too. And it's we probably should be doing that here as a body already. And I think that that is just that much more needed if it's going to some kind of virtual prospect.
Correct. I did make a note on that.
Thank you. Yep. And the last one I'd mention, I know Councilman Gray speaks next, so I'll let him speak mostly to this one. But I'm obviously supportive of number 52 to repeal what was the prohibition of affirmative action. But the one thing I would say in your conversations, as that legislation comes into, it gets crafted, is that it's really important when things go on the ballot that ballot language makes sense and is true to the intent and is easily discernible for voters to understand. I thought of that because when you look on our agenda, even the wording here is confusing when it says, create a constitutional amendment to repeal the Initiative 424 from 2008 that prohibited the usage of affirmative action in Nebraska. Even that is very lengthy and cumbersome, and takes more than once to read to really understand. So as that comes together, I would just request that we try to make that as clear and concise as possible as we put that on the ballot.
Yes.
Thank you.
Very good.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Councilmember Gray, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just want to address item 50 for a minute. When the George Floyd incident occurred, there was a lot of talk and a lot of conversation about addressing racism, but more specifically, addressing the structure of racism. There's a book that I would encourage people to read. The book, I can't remember the name of the author off of the top of my head, but I'm sure that you would find the title if you Googled it or went on Amazon or whatever. And the book is titled When Affirmative Action Was White. When Affirmative Action Was White. What we have here, and I'm going to take you just through a little bit of history. The Davis-Bacon Act, when it was passed, did a lot of things to create opportunities for the construction trades and so forth. But at the same time, it was creating those opportunities. It locked black people out. I mentioned the horse racing industry. In the 1870s, 80s, 90s, and the early 1900s, most of the jockeys who ran in horse races were African American. By the 1930s, there was one black jockey. Unions had locked them out. When fair housing came along, and the Fair Housing Bill was passed, they found amendments to lock black people out when affirmative action was white. All I'm asking for here is a fair opportunity. For 250 years, we couldn't talk about freedom as black people because we didn't have it. So to sit and make an argument that somehow we all have had freedom all this time really underscores the necessity for breaking down this racial structure that exists. This has been, what I'm asking for in this language here is plain and simple language that simply says that that Initiative 424 ought to be eliminated. Now, while it is not a law that prohibits whites and blacks from being married, while it is not a law that does a number of other things that affects black people negatively, this legislation, this is one of the most racist pieces of legislation that I have seen in a long time. Very racist piece of legislation. And I'm not saying that affirmative action is 100% the answer, but let me give you a statistic. When several of us first came on this council, the police department was 4% African American. 4%. Today it's over 10%. When we first came on this council, Latinos were less than 3%. Today we're almost at 8 or 9%. The methods that we used, we run the risk of those being challenged by this law. It needs to be off of the books, it needs to be seriously addressed, and it needs to be pointed out for the racist language that it is. And if we are serious, as we said we were when the George Floyd incident happened, if we are serious about addressing the structure of racism, not the individual things, police over here, something else over here, something else over here. If we're about addressing and eliminating the structure of racism, it starts with eliminating this language from the state constitution. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Councilmember Gregg. Councilmember Melton, you're recognized.
Thank you. The author's name is Ira Katz-Nelson. I don't know if I'm pronouncing the last name right, but Katz-Nelson, and it is available on Amazon. So we can all have it tomorrow if we want. I just want to say that Councilman Gray, I think I understand both sides of this, and I've always viewed affirmative action as actually being inherently racist. It's been because you're picking one over the other. And it may be that you and I can have a conversation on what you're looking at as opposed to required affirmative action versus eliminating the language of saying not allowed at all, meaning if somebody wants to give a preference, they're not allowed to under the law. So it sounds like maybe I don't have an accurate understanding of what you're looking to do on this. I don't know that because I don't have a full understanding, my vote will be no on this. However, I would like to say, Councilman Gray, that I fully support your right to march down to Lincoln. I fully support your right to ask for this. I fully support your right as a council member to fight for this and fight for it on behalf of your constituents and your thoughts and feelings, just like we do and the rest of us do on other issues that we have going down there. And so for you to be criticized today, even if somebody may be against the resolution or wouldn't vote for the legislation, I fully support your right to attempt to have it passed. And I don't think you should be criticized for that at all. And in fact, I think you should be commended for the amount of efforts that you put forth on legislation. Because out of all of us, and this isn't a criticism of any of the rest of us, because we all go down to Lincoln and we all testify, but I have to say during the legislative sessions, I think Councilman Gray's down there once or twice a week. He gets called at the last minute. He is going down and not only testifying in front of the legislative committees, but the subcommittees, and is testifying on off time, not just during the legislative sessions. So the amount of time and effort you spend on studying legislation, and I have to say I've come to you on a number of occasions and asked you about legislation, that would explain to me, because you are certainly on top of that. So I want to commend you for that. And again, I think it's a discussion that should be had. And I think it's an understanding and a reading of both sides, because I heard people on both sides of the issue that made complete sense. And so I want to have that discussion, and is there something that's not affirmative action that would achieve the same thing? Because it seems to me that it's the term in and of itself that is very polarizing, to say the least. So maybe there is something more that we could do to work on to achieve exactly what you said. Our goal over the last 8 years was to increase diversity. And if your goal is to increase diversity, which is a noble goal and one that we should have and continue to have, not only at the city level, but in our own personal businesses, how do we do that without, and not have it mandated and not have it be racist, where I'm searching for one or the other? So, I mean, you really got me thinking when you said that. How do we kind of mandate the increase in diversity, as we're doing, as I think the mayor's done, and do that within the confines of whatever laws we have? So, I mean, that's it's a philosophical thought, but also one that we do need to address legislatively. So I look forward to having that discussion. I'm not sure I'm there yet with bringing affirmative action back as the answer. But if there's language in there that you believe is limiting people from increasing their diversity, then that needs to be addressed as well. So I look forward to having that discussion. I support the rest of this, and I think what people maybe don't understand is we're not the ones drafting the legislation, so that's why you're not going to see a whole lot of detail in these. In the two, in number 51 and 52, legislation was drafted by legislators, because we've had it there before, so I could send anybody the legislation if they wanted. Unfortunately, I think my recommendations might just put people to sleep in the language. But a lot of times what we're doing is we're putting forth ideas and things that we would like to see state senators do, and we're not providing the detail, and we're certainly not drafting the bills. So that may be the misunderstanding. I think Ms. Johnson left, but that's what I wanted to let her know, is that I don't have any more information on most of these other than the ones that I proposed. So with that, Jack, I want to thank you for all your work and thank you for the reminders along the way, especially in the summer, and responding to all of my questions in regards to legislation, upcoming legislation. So it's tough, but I'll still support 57.
Thank you, Councilmember Melton. Before calling on Councilmember Gray, who's next in the queue, I've asked the clerk on terms of voting how we can do this to make it more efficient. She said we can do it whichever way we decide. It's my sense that if we had a vote on items 49 and 51 through 57 as one vote and 50 as another vote, that's what I'm sensing right now. But think about it, council members. Councilmember Gray.
Mr. President, you know, when we're talking about, I think people, as the gentleman from Detroit mentioned before he left, I think people misunderstand what affirmative action is about. Let me give you an example, and let me use the police department again. Years ago, the police department, and this is still true today, all you need is a high school diploma to be on the police department. That's all you need. You don't need to do anything else. But as a result of the efforts of making people be more responsive, and as a result of this council working to change, now, granted, I did a lot of the work just in terms of making sure testing procedures were changed, but the fact of the matter is I couldn't have done it without the support of this council. But you take all of those things into consideration when we're talking about, for example, the police department. Right now, when police officers are hired, I doubt that you could find a police officer that is hired now that doesn't have a college education or at least several years of college. That's what affirmative action does. And so, you know, I think we look at it wrong because we're looking at it to say we're giving somebody, now when affirmative action was white, that was a privilege because people who didn't necessarily deserve some of the things they got because they were white. In the same instance, black people who were similarly situated didn't get those positions because they were black. Now, when we're talking about affirmative action, I'm just talking about eliminating it from the Constitution and using whatever tools are necessary. We say that we want our police and fire and our public works and other departments within city government to reflect the city, to reflect what the city looks like. How do we get there? It's always nice to say it, but how do we get there? What is the tool that we use to get there, especially when for not for decades or years, but for centuries, a certain group of people were kept at the back end to this day? How do we address that? And how do we make that work? I always am supportive of having discussion, and I know Ms. Melton, sometimes I think what people ought to recognize sometimes is that you and I don't always agree, but we always have great discussion. And we can always talk to each other and leave here and go have a cup of coffee after the day is over. That's what needs to happen in government all across the board. But when we're talking about affirmative action, when we're talking about how do you fix what has damaged a certain group of people for such a long period of time, what tool do you use? That's all I'm asking. Eliminate this barrier so that we can begin to talk about what are the tools we can use, because now with police and fire doing the kinds of things that they're doing, they run a risk because of what's in this legislation. They run a risk. This city runs a risk because of this legislation. It needs to go. I'm not asking for or calling for any specific type of affirmative action. I'm saying take the gloves off so that as each city, as each county, as each government subdivision wrestles with how we're going to make our community reflect our city. What are we going to do? How are we going to do that? What tools do we use? What is available to us? It may not be affirmative action. It may be something else. But at the end of the day, if we don't eliminate this language, then almost everything else is cut off from specifically people of color. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Councilmember Gray. Councilmember Harding, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to point out that Keith Station is actually here today, who just want to make the point that the mayor certainly has taken the position of trying to expand diversity, at least as it relates to the city's workforce, and hired Keith in that position to help enable that to grow and those actions to continue. When this issue number 50 came up before us last summer, I did vote against it. I'll vote against it today as well too. But I want to join Councilmember Melton in her offer, or at least to Councilmember Gray, to continue to have the dialogue as to what tools that might be. So I look forward to, I hope the two of you will let me join in, because I think it's an important issue, and look to see how we can continue that conversation to look for those opportunities.
Mr. President, I don't mind taking 50 of consent.
Well, it's one public hearing, and then
Yeah.
I was told we have to decide how we want to vote. So I was just suggesting, I felt in my sense of the council, 2 votes could accomplish everything.
Mm-hmm.
So
I can move to approve 49, 51 through 57.
without objection, so ordered. Madam Clerk?
Palermo.
Yes.
Festerson. Gray. Harding. Melton. Mr. President.
Yes.
Motion passed 6-0.
Is there a motion on item 50? Roll call.
Palermo. Festerson. Gray. Harding. Melton. Mr. President.
Yes.
Motion passed 4-2. Item 58, an ordinance levying a special tax and assessment on all lots and pieces of real estate within Sewer Improvement District 1579.
The public hearing on item 58 begins at this time. Are there any proponents? Are there any opponents? The public hearing is closed.
Item 59, an ordinance vacating the east-west alley between South 5th Street and South 6th Street and between Woolworth Avenue and Pine Street. Planning Board and Planning Department recommend approval.
The public hearing on item 59 begins at this time. Are there any proponents or opponents? The public hearing is closed.
Item 60, an ordinance to accept the bid from Waste Connections of Nebraska, Inc. for rubbish container service at various Omaha Police Department facilities in the amount of $16,764.
The public hearing on item 60 begins at this time. Are there any proponents or opponents?
Luis Jimenez, 3306 Birch Street. I think that the rubbish, the containers placed in the facility or at the facility for rubbish, it's good operating procedure. I know that the police are very well taken care of, especially in their facilities. So I support that, and I hope that also there's opportunities to just put containers for rubbish out through the community for collection. Thank you.
The public hearing is closed.
Item 61, an ordinance to accept the bid of Sandry Fire Supply LLC to provide fire hoses for the Omaha Fire Department at a total cost of $46,836.75.
Public hearing on item 61 begins at this time. Are there any proponents or opponents? The public hearing is closed.
Item 62, an ordinance to approve an agreement with Emeritus Life Insurance Company to provide administrative services for the city's self-insured dental plan.
The public hearing on item 62 begins at this time. Are there any proponents or opponents? The public hearing is closed.
Item 63, an ordinance to approve an agreement with U-Turn in the amount of $2,880 and to authorize funding for such agreement from the City of Omaha's fiscal year 2019 Project Safe Neighborhoods Grant Award.
The public hearing on item 63 begins at this time. Are there any proponents?
Good afternoon, council members and Mr. President. My slave name is David Mitchell, but Douglas County currently knows me as 36929. My residence is the Douglas County Concentration Camp, or as you would know it, the Douglas County Corrections, but I'll give you my real address for the record because I know Mr. President is going to ask me for it. That's 4020 Mary Street. I stand before the council today to speak on behalf of agenda item number 63. Regarding safe neighborhoods, the Safe Neighborhoods Grant, also dealing with the Project Safe Neighborhoods, something that a lot of people out in West Omaha like to keep by keeping black people out, by redlining us. I know there may be a few members to the council that might be surprised to see me today after your army hauled me off from the last city council meeting back in September 15th, but surprise, I'm back. From the grips of the overseers after paying your $300,000 10% ransom. First off, also, Councilmember Melton, I want to give you a round of applause for the show that you put on for everybody in here today, making it seem like if you really cared about the affirmative action, if you really cared for
Mr. Mitchell, you're
you
off
would have voted
topic.
for it.
You're out of order. Last warning.
You're out of order, sir.
Please remove him.
I'm out of order. Can I get a motion for me to stay in here?
You're not. You're out. You were warned.
Motion?
You're out.
You didn't give me a warning, sir.
I did.
Yeah, and I stopped speaking. I went back to it, and I said you're out of order by speaking over me speaking.
Are there any other proponents on item 63? Are there any opponents on item 63? The public hearing is closed.
Item 64, an ordinance to amend Section 10-187 of the Omaha Municipal Code to lower the financial limits for the selection of firms being awarded contracts for professional services to require the submission of additional supporting material to the City Council upon award of a contract. A is amendment of the whole requested by Councilmember Pauls.
The public hearing on item 64 begins at this time. Are there any proponents?
Hi, I'm Jeannie McClure, and I'm with the Council of Engineering Companies. I represent engineering consulting firms across the state of Nebraska, and many of these firms are serving as partner companies to the city of Omaha. I was here today to thank Councilman Pauls for his interest in this professional services selection process, and would like to note two things about that. The current threshold is a best practice and falls within that of Omaha's peer cities. And number two, to lessen the threshold would both reduce the effectiveness and efficiency of the Omaha Public Works staff, as well as create a hardship for the city's partnering engineering firms. So we are pleased that Councilman Pauls has
Ms.
taken
McClure,
the, oh, I'm sorry,
we need your address.
2508 Rathbone Road in Lincoln.
Thank you.
So we're pleased that he has taken the time to interact with both our organization and our member firms and offered this amendment, which we do support.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents? Are there any opponents? The public hearing is closed.
Item 65, an ordinance supplementing and amending ordinance number 37507 to issue sanitary sewage system revenue bonds.
The public hearing on item 65 begins at this time. Are there any proponents?
Steve Curtis, City Finance. I just wanted to point out that this is a surety bond that's related to the sewer issuance that we just did. By amending language over time in the various issuances that we had, we're able to now use a surety bond instead of reserve. And the reserve had gotten to about 30 million, so it frees up that money to be used for sewer work.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents? Are there any opponents? The public hearing is closed.
Non-action items, items 66 through 105, do not require a public hearing for City Council consideration at this meeting, but will be placed on a future agenda for public hearing and/or vote. The reason for non-action is noted after the item on the agenda, as well as the date the item is expected to appear on an agenda for consideration.
Does anyone want to break out into a over the river? Through the woods?
I got canceled.
All right. Roll call.
Palermo. Festerson. Gray. Harding. Melton. Mr. President.
Yes.
Motion passed 6-0. Meeting is adjourned at 4 o'clock.
He finally gets us all inside. 2 minutes of sleep.